That's the backdrop done. I'm going to put a little bit more detail on now, another layer. So we do one layer and then we do another one over it and we let it dry between each layer. Makes it very simple. Now we're not painting architecture here, we're just putting texture on, vague general shapes and textures which will just indicate that there's something there. It'll set off the mental triggers and we can vary the colour a little bit. Look, here's some burnt sienna going in, and just a kind of indicator that there's some masonry there. It's a warm colour and it will just insinuate the masonry, the brick tiles on roofs and things like that. So it's a kind of loose, ragged effect, and that's all we need. Now we've got pontoons and they're going across the middle, so I'll put those in. Find them first, they're very pale. These are rectangles. There we go. Little dark grey markings painted across. I'll get the hairdryer on this and dry it off, and then we'll start painting the boats. Now we're going to paint the boats, and the first thing we're going to do is paint blue. We're going to do the lightest blue first and then work through to darker blues, and I'm going to mix cyan here. You could use the cerulean blue as well. I'm using this cyan, and I'm going to mix that with some French ultramarine. It doesn't matter exactly how much, but it's just going to give it a slightly lighter version of French ultramarine. And now I'm going to start to paint the blue over the boats. It's not crucial exactly where the paint goes, as long as it fills the shapes of the boats. Some of this colour will disappear later when we paint dark over it. So we start by putting the blue on. Once it's on, we can play with it at the next stage. We're breaking it down into simple steps. Use the point of the brush to get the prow of the boat. Define the prow of the boats with the blue. Use the point of the brush to poke up into that corner. And now we just brush the blue on. And it's only fabric. These are fabric coverings. And of course they're quite rough and ready, so you can't go far wrong. They don't have to be very exact in their shapes. So that's that blue done. And that one. Mixing cyan with French ultramarine. And now we do this one. And this colour will overpower any colours underneath. So you notice I've painted the pontoons across the front of the boat, but they won't show up because this will cover any colour that lies underneath. So it's quite a strong blue. And we just define the shapes of the boats nicely there. That's the blue of the front. And we carry on putting this colour on. A little bit of cyan, or cerulean blue if you prefer. And we get the fabric onto the back of the boat. So we've now got the shapes at the top of the boat. There's this last little bit to do here. And I'm painting right over the masking here. When the masking comes off, I'll rub across that and reinstate the blue over where I've masked. And now I'm going to carry on and put this undercoat of blue on all the rest of the boats. Right, that's the first layer dry. That was pretty simple, and it's defined the tops of the gondolas. Now we're going to put a bit of shadow in with the same colour, but just darker. Before I do that, though, I've just got to fiddle about and get rid of a little bit of masking fluid. It's this masking fluid here, and I'm going to use a colour shaper as a rubber and just carefully get shot of it where I don't want it. There we go. Now I'm going to start to put on the darker layer of blue. I'm just going to use French ultramarine for this, and I'm going to put a tiny little bit of Payne's grey on the palette in case it needs to be darker still. The next stage will involve using the Payne's grey, and that will get us our intense blacks, and they are black. I can't think of another word for them. So we'll just start by seeing how it goes with the ultramarine blue on its own. And these are the patterns of crinkles in the fabric. So we start to pick these out and we get a bit of the feeling that this is fabric, and we give it a bit of shape. So there we go, very quick. I'm not going to try and copy the folds of the fabric too closely, but if you just drag the brush like that, it won't be far wrong. It'll look like fabric. There we go. We're getting some of the tucks and the folds, and they seem to cover these gondolas with this blue fabric at the end of every year. Here, to get over the problem with the masked whites, I'm just going to paint over that like that, rub it around a bit where the masking fluid was, and then we'll come back to that. And that shouldn't be a problem. Carry on with the fabric. So essentially what we're doing is we're building up with a series of shapes. We never try and paint everything in one go. This is multi-layered watercolour, and it's very effective, but it also happens to be much easier than trying to paint everything in one go. Now what I'm going to do is carry straight on and do the darks. I'm going to put the dark on the back of this cover, on the rear of this gondola. Put that in first so I know where that is. The paint's not quite dry, but that's all right. It doesn't seem to be a problem. That doesn't seem to be a problem. I'm going to carry on now putting the darks, putting the darker markings now onto this fabric. So we're building up in layers. It's practically dry now. In fact, that is absolutely dry. So we're building up a set of shapes, and we're using the dark paint to do it. This is Payne's grey with a tiny little bit of ultramarine, but it's almost completely jet black. There we go. So we're beginning to really define the shapes of the gondolas. That's the interior. You'll notice here I'm just leaving a few little flecks of light from underneath. It's not white because it's got the blue colour from the water, but it just adds a little bit of interest to the interior of the boat. Same here, the dark interior of the boat. And what we're doing is painting dark but leaving light. We're defining the lights with the dark. I'll just get all the covers done first, and once we've got that out of the way, then we can just carry on with the hulls, which are a lot easier. I'm just going to go back and make sure that I've got all these creases in the fabric. So what I've done is I've added a little bit of Payne's grey to some of the ultramarine blue, and I'm just going back over some of these just to make sure that we've got all those shadow patterns and creases in place. And then we can move on to the next bit. That's going to be the actual hulls of the gondolas themselves. Now we're going to paint the hulls. I'm going to paint them black, and I'm going to start with the ones on the left. So it really is just a matter of sticking the paint on. So here we go. And we're just going to define this little bit here and build it up piece by piece. Now where I've masked, I don't have to worry about saving these whites. I'm going to just brush dark for these hulls down to the waterline, and then I'll finish them off when I complete the water. Here we go. Nice, thick, dark, wet paint. And notice when I paint the hulls, I'm actually defining the gondola next to that boat. Each hull helps to define the next boat. I'm going to lighten the paint off a little bit for the front of the hull here where it catches the light. Not much, just a touch. And come back to this one. So we've got gondola there, and just going to put a bit of dark into the boat there. And we'll move on to this one now. There we go. And just painting dark, absolutely jet black into the edge of this gondola hole. And here I've just painted water. It's dirty water from the Payne's grey, but I've just painted water into the edge of the hole, and the colour will spread through it. So it's very dark there, and it's spreading through the water to give this sort of sheen where the light is paling off. And now I'm going to finish the rest of these gondolas using exactly the same technique, just putting the dark in where I can see it needs to be dark, maybe making it a bit paler, and we'll finish them all off. That brings us to the halfway mark in the painting. Join me next time and we'll finish it. One thing you have to be careful with is not to drop a blob of masking fluid onto the paper. That's the masking finished. Put the lid back on. Would you believe that?
Now available to buy. Try these techniques at home whenever you wish. The extended DVD of today's workshop and the book that accompanies this series are now available from the Painting and Drawing channel. For further information and to order your copy, go to www.paintingdrawingchannel.com.